If God could handcraft the perfect police officer, inside and out, it would look just like Tony. Command presence oozed from his pores, but his size and strength were just a small part of who he was. He was intelligent, organized, creative, and detailed. When Tony was at work, he always had the advantage, and his level of success made it readily apparent that Tony wasn't just good at this job, he was great at this job. But when we think of Tony, many of us remember something else. Tony truly cared. His compassion and kind-heartedness took his work and his personal life to a whole nother level. I'm going to share a story that speaks of Tony's character. And there's someone sitting in this room today who knows all about this story. So about 7 or 8 years ago, there's two guys working the midnight shift. Two cops doing their thing. One of them's Tony. One of them works in small town Iowa, about 100 miles straight north of here. They're out there doing their thing, keeping the city safe, patrolling the streets. And one of them has to manage a horrific accident. Many of us in this room have been there. You know what I'm talking about. One of those that's burned in your memory. This officer thought he'd had enough. He'd seen enough pain, he'd seen enough tragedy in his years of service, and he was done. He was going to turn in his badge at the end of the shift. And he made a phone call, and he called Tony. And he started telling Tony that story and what his plans were. And Tony, being the epitome of a strategist, he waited. He waited for the perfect time. And then he chimed in with this. He said, "You're not a quitter. You didn't raise a quitter. If you quit, you will regret this for the rest of your life. This is what we do. And if we don't do it, who else will do it?" That was a conversation between a father and a son. And that officer eventually rose to serve as chief of police in Belmont, Iowa. Chief, picking Tony as your go-to guy is a pretty wise decision. Mom and Dad, you raised a good one. You should be proud, because we are. But Chief, you're not alone. There are other people in this church today who have benefited in similar fashion. You see, Tony didn't just cheer for the underdog, he lifted them up. If someone was struggling, he helped them out. If they stumbled, he lifted them back up, put them on their feet. It wasn't necessarily his job or his place. He did it because it needed to be done. He did it because he was Tony. There are students at Roosevelt High School who are more focused and more driven because Tony mentored them. There are crime victims in our community that saw justice served because of the work that Tony did as a detective. There are police officers in this room today who are more mature and more successful, personally and professionally, because Tony showed them the way. His character defined him, and our organization is stronger because his legacy of making us better lives on. When you ran into Tony, you talked about family. He was a proud husband, a proud father. Tony loves Zoe, and he loves you kids. He was quick to share all the stories, every trip, every date, every tackle, every pin, every basket, every base hit, every game of punch-out, every vacation. If you ran into Tony more than once during the day, you probably got to hear the same stories again. He was just that proud. Last winter, right before Cameron wrestled in the state tournament, we had that discussion 4 times in one day, all before lunch. I knew the names of every kid in your bracket, and I knew their record. And your dad knew you were going to beat them. Your dad is very proud. He's a proud man, proud of you kids, proud of his wife. Cameron, Haley, Max, not trying to scare you here, but there's nearly 500 people that work in our building. And every single one of them pretty much knew your every move. Your dad loves you and he's proud of you. And we were happy to share his enthusiasm about your lives. That's what it's all about.